Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
All right. Hello again, everybody. It's been a few weeks since we've talked, but I am thrilled to have Mr. Rick Tegtmeier on. I don't think this is your first interview post-retirement, but hopefully I'm one of the lucky ones to get you on here. But we've been friends for a long time. Our families go back a long ways, back to when you were a kid.
Yeah.
But you've recently taken down your shingle at Des Moines Golf and Country Club, and you're officially retired as of Halloween, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So, I just wanted to get you on, before you fade off into the sunset and do whatever you're going to do, and kind of give a recap. I think you were either my first or second guest on when we started this 4 years ago. I was thinking about Julie and I were up on the mountain behind our house hiking this morning. I was thinking about kind of the things I wanted to talk about with you, and I think you were either first or second on my list, and so it's been about 4 years, and I figured it was a great time to kind of bookend, how we've come and kind of recap some of the time in the industry for you, and maybe what you got planned. So thanks so much for joining me.
Well, my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. So, and I'm happy for you too. I think it's been a great career, and you've really left an impact on the industry. But I'm sure it's well earned respite and some relaxation. So let's start with the important stuff. What's on the list? What are you up to now?
Well, basically, I've been this is my second week of retirement. So one of my first goals, believe it or not, was to start taking care of myself.
Good.
All those years in the industry, you're working long hours and early hours. And so for the last 2 weeks now, I've been getting up, walking 2-3 miles every morning, watching my diet, watching what I eat, and working out a little bit, and almost lost 10 pounds already. So
Good for you.
Start and just no plans right now. Just taking it easy. I'm going to enjoy hunting and fishing, some golf yet this fall, and just see where it goes.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned before we started recording that Sherry retired in January. So you're both tending to grandkids and doing all that stuff, and I'm sure that in itself is keeping you pretty busy. We tried to get on Friday, and you had an emergency fishing expedition, so we had to postpone it until today. But no, that's exciting. I've talked to a lot of people that are close, or they've got their I had who was it? Just the other day, I had somebody that actually had, it was one of my sales reps. He had an app on his phone that had a countdown. And he's, whatever it was, 3 years, 14 weeks. And he had a countdown of how long it was going to be before he retired. And they're going to travel the world. So everybody looks a little differently at it. It's fun to think about, I guess.
Yeah, we're definitely, travel is definitely in our future. We're going to Florida in February. We rented a house.
Okay.
And going to spend some time down there with friends, doing some golfing, hopefully doing some fishing. And then in the spring, I think we're going to hop in the car, and I've never been Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Washington. I've been to Montana and Idaho, Yellowstone, those types of things, but we're just going to hop in the car and go that way and see who we see and see what we see. And
well, since our kids are all gone, we've got plenty of room here. Please stop and see us when you come through town, because you'll drive right through Coeur d'Alene on the way to Seattle.
Yep. So
there's lots to see. There
is lots to see. So I'm looking forward to doing that in the spring.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I kind of wanted to go back to where you started, and as I mentioned, I think my father-in-law was your high school basketball and golf coach. Is that right?
That's correct.
We talked at length about that on the last podcast with you, but so you got your start, I would assume, at the ill-fated Rockford Country Club, correct?
That is correct. Little 9-hole golf course in Rockford, Iowa. So started there when I was 13, 14,
So for all the whippersnappers listening to this, I can remember pushing the envelope. The superintendent was saying that he was forced to take greens to 530 seconds. I can't remember what that is in decimal points, but it's not 0.10.
No.
What do you remember about when you first got into it?
So when I first got into it, everything was measured off of a bed bar and a screw.
Yeah.
And the standard in the industry was 3/16
For greens.
for greens. And
So-
we mowed greens at 3/16. We mowed fairways at 1.5 inches, bluegrass fairways.
So 3/16 is 0.1875 and 530 seconds is 0.15. But we were an 18-hole country club, so it was probably, far higher brow stuff.
And we verticut, we spread top dressing by hand. I think when I was 16 or 17, we got a Metermatic walk behind top dresser. And you used to have to shovel it into a trailer, shovel it into the top dresser, then spread it. But it was spread evenly throughout the whole green.
For the first time ever, right?
For the first time ever.
Yeah.
And then you drag it in with an old Cushman. We had a 3-wheel Cushman with 3 on the tree.
Yep.
And that's how we did things,
It was a pretty simple operation at that time.
It was, then you verticut first, and I remember we had a walk behind verticutter first, and we had a walk behind West Point air fire, a drum style.
Mm-hmm.
You used to pick it up on both ends, and if you step too hard, you'd run your shin right into the spinning tines going around.
Yep.
And then we got a DDoS air fire.
I was just thinking of that name. It was either Dados or Didos, but
yeah, we called it DDoS. But it mounted right to our Cushman, and cores went right into the drum. It was quite
revolutionary, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that was the first air fire I think I ran at the country club I was at in Minneapolis. It brought back memories, and then we dragged fairways with we had a Toro General. You remember that machine?
Yep.
And that was I thought that was going to be the winner when they were trying to name the Outcross.
Right, the General.
I wanted the General 2.0, but they didn't bite on that. But that thing was a beast.
I restored a General and sold it, and now I actually have a Jacobson Worthington G10.
Yeah.
That I had when I worked the 1 year in Chicago. They had a G10 tractor, and I said, if you ever want to get rid of it, I'll buy it. And
so that's without the cutting units. That's just
a tractor that pulled the gang mower.
Yep.
And so I have the G10. It runs great. It needs a paint job, so I think I'm going to restore it. But it'll do well. I think my father-in-law clocked me at 39 mile an hour down the road.
Unreal. Well, see, now that's on your plans, right? That's on the list.
That's one of my bucket list.
The to-do list. Yeah. So I'll bet everything besides greens were probably mowed at the same height of cut, right?
Oh yeah. Well, we had a rough mower. We had a Woods rough mower that mowed roughs at 3 inches, and we pulled it with a Ford 8N tractor.
Okay.
And
so again, for the young guys listening, I mean, this wasn't the 30s. This was the 70s and 80s, right?
Definitely the 70s and 80s.
This really wasn't. I mean, as you get older, that wasn't a long time ago.
No, I remember when I went to Des Moines Golf in '83, we were still mowing with gang mowers on fairways.
Yep.
And in '85, we killed the fairways off on one golf course and reseeded them to bent grass. And we mowed fairways that year with a Toro triplex because that's all was available.
Yep.
And then Lesco came out with their fairway mower for bent grass.
Yeah. I remember that.
It was a 5 gang, and the side gangs folded in to the side. And we bought a couple of those, and we started. That was kind of the revolution of contour mowing fairways.
Right.
The side edges. Before, all your edges were nice and straight because you had gang mowers.
Yeah.
And now it's all come full circle. Everybody's coming back to that again.
Isn't
So
that funny?
Giving you the
Yeah.
tuxedo cut or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I hadn't
And
thought about it that way. You're right, because you're not turning on a dime with a
no,
tractor and a
and a
gang
gang
mower.
mower. You mow straight edges.
Yeah.
Now that's what everybody's going back to. You know, Des Moines Golf had all these contour edges that Bill
Mm-hmm.
Byers had did back in the 80s when we killed the fairways, and because you could mow them with the triflex mower or
Yeah.
these.
I remember we didn't have the Toros, we had Jacobson triplexes. But that was the same time that the switch was made to lightweight mowing on the fairways.
Right. Right.
And yeah, it's interesting how that I hadn't even thought about that we've kind of come full circle again on that. That's pretty good observation. So aerification equipment has changed so much. Mowing equipment. I mean, some of the stuff now. I had a chance recently to see a demo on the Firefly 5-gang autonomous mower. Man, oh man!
I was at a demo 2 weeks ago on
it. Think about that compared to dragging a gang mower. I mean, that. What was your thought on that? If you saw the demo.
Well, I was very impressed with it. You know, you still have to have a person there with it.
Yeah.
No matter what, it's not just going to take off and leave your shop, or, like these little Husqvarna GPS mowers now,
Yep.
They've got a docking station and all that. So this is a little bit different, but it still did a wonderful job. You look at the videos of where it mowed on the PGA Tour, the aerial, and everything was striped in unison.
If you wanted north-south, you got north-south on every single hole.
It was unbelievable. Yeah. And you could do it by degrees. Again, everything in golf now has changed to a number.
Yes.
Yep. From moisture meters to directions to
compaction, you name it.
Everything you do is now managed to a number.
Yeah.
Versus what we started out by the seat of our pants, basically.
And I think to a degree, I think a lot of, especially with moisture meters, I've talked about this a lot. It seems like that has really made the job of the superintendent, I think, a little bit easier to convey to the next generation, because your feel and my feel is hard to translate.
Right.
But if you say 12 is what our goal is for the moisture meter, then 12 is 12. It doesn't.
Yeah, there's no. Yeah.
Yeah.
That in itself. Yeah. It definitely is.
It may be different at Wakanda, or it may be different at Rockford Country Club, but at Des Moines Golf and Country Club, 12 is 12.
Right.
And
yeah. You're absolutely right. And
I do like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I do too. I think that made life a lot easier for everybody to understand. Yeah. It wasn't just you're going out that morning and doing an observation looking. You could predict the dry spot before you actually even seen it.
Yeah. It's I wonder if there's a point at which we get overwhelmed with that data stream, if it's just too much.
I think sooner or later there's just so much data coming through there now with the GS3 ball.
Yeah.
The moisture meters, the in-ground sensors, the weather stations, and then you're collecting clippings and measuring humidity and all these things, trying to get them all to correlate to one number. I mean, you're trying to do all this stuff for one thing, putting.
Yeah, putting quality.
Putting quality, and it's
Did you measure clipping?
Yeah, we did. We started doing it. Nate and Mitch both convinced me we should try it, and we started doing it about 3 years ago. And the reason we did it, we had greens that we rebuilt back in 13, 14, 15.
Yeah.
And then we had original soil push-up greens, and so we started seeing a big correlation between and differences trying to manage those. And I was old and skeptical and didn't want to do it. And they convinced me, and pretty soon we started seeing differences. Every time it rained, you see a flush of growth. You knew mineralization was happening. All those things that you hear about, read about, you could again see it happening. So it was a good thing to do.
So was it more, did you find it more confirmation of what you kind of knew in the back of your mind, or was it dictating management decisions?
Well, it definitely dictated management decisions as we grew more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
At first it was just confirmation, but as you got more comfortable with it, you could then start predicting seeing your PGRs wearing out,
Sure.
and you believing, if you're believing the growing degree scale on, when you should start spraying again and all that, we could see it.
You could see it before the number popped up.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. Interesting.
So I think it's a great thing. It's just very costly to do, time consuming. You got to input those numbers somewhere.
Right. Well, and I think that, you hit on another thing that I've struggled with through the years, and it's the fact that you've got maybe not competing companies, but you've got all these companies that are focused on one item, whether it's growing degree days or in-ground sensors, like you said, or this automation. And there's very little conversation about somebody pulling all this data into one management system, right? Because now you've got all of these different screens popping up and trying to figure out where, it'd be kind of cool if you could find somebody that could collate all of that stuff. And we're close. I think we're getting closer.
Yeah, I think the USGA Deacon program is getting there.
Yeah.
And I think Bill over in Nebraska, with his stuff, he's getting closer to doing that very same thing. I mean, we just used an Excel spreadsheet really to collect all the data for us. Trying to input that stuff into all that stuff, you almost have to have a full-time secretary doing it.
Yeah.
The GS3 ball was great because it went right to your smartphone and it uploaded it into the Deacon program and you could see it. And my GM, he could see what the results were every day.
Okay.
If he wanted to look at, did he understand them? I think he did to a point, but
right.
Again, you're looking at smoothness and trueness and speed and all that. And it was a good thing for us to use, because like one golf course we'd airify and one we just, one we core airify, one we just needle tine airify, to always give the golfers a good experience.
Sure.
And then we flip it and we could really see the difference in trueness and smoothness as to what the golf ball was doing. And you couldn't really see that with your eye.
Yeah.
It was remarkable to me how long it took for that one golf course to get back to the same condition as the other one was.
So remind me, you had two different ages of greens, 13, 14, 15. You said you rebuilt.
Yeah, actually 4 years in a row we built new greens. Each 9.
Okay.
We did a total of, I think, 12 or 13 greens over that 4-year span of the 36, or of the 40 greens that we had.
Got it. So you got a variety of different construction materials and ages and things like that.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's where all that data collection definitely helps, because you're not, Chuck Barber and I were talking about that, and the fact that he had some holes that were push up and completely different. I mean, you can't manage those the same, but the demand is, I want number 4 to putt the exact same way as 18 does. And
right. We had some greens that I built in 84, 85 when I was there the first time. And those greens, believe it or not, you fast forward 30 years, they actually were the same as the soil greens, because they'd had a layer of top dressing built up on them.
Yep.
And so those greens that I built in 13 that were hard as a rock, 13, 14, we built those greens because those were the greens that were going to be in the Solheim Cup.
Okay.
In 17. And there was still a big difference, just in 2 years between the speed and firmness of
Yep.
those greens because they were new, you know.
And you would have made that conversion to more of a USGA spec anyway. But if I remember right, you had some bicarbonates and some salts in your well, right?
Yeah, most definitely. They have high bicarbonates and high salts.
Yeah.
We have a Jordan well, which is over 2,800 feet deep.
Jeez, that's amazing.
You know, the pump sits down at 600 feet below ground, 175 horse submersible.
Unreal.
Yeah, so it's
And that served both.
that was
golf
all of our
courses.
water.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Okay, so we've taken a walk down memory lane. One thing you've done and I've had the privilege of doing is you've grown a lot of superintendents. You've brought them up and sent them on their way and built teams. I want to get your feelings on what, as a veteran of the industry, how did your management skills or management approaches change with changing generations of young people coming into the industry? And what do you see going forward for people trying to not only to keep the pipeline full of future assistants and superintendents, but also to build them into successful industry folks?
Well, first of all, me, I grew up the son of a Marine. And so growing up, one word was yelled at me and the other one was an F-bomb. You know, so that's how I was raised. And
Yeah.
I'm a pretty straight, there's no gray in my life. I'm black and white.
Right.
And my management style early was probably to be just like my dad.
Mhm.
I was, you wanted to get things done now, boom, 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 and you yelled and probably.
But that worked largely.
Well, that's the
in
way
that era.
That's the way the whole industry was.
Yeah. Not right or wrong, but it
No,
worked.
that's just how it was.
Yeah.
And so over time, I'm still, I was, I'm a type A personality, got to get things done. But, if you ask people that work for me, I probably push too hard all the time.
Sure.
But I think over time, I've learned that, we started having management meetings every morning with my staff before we go out.
Mm-hmm.
And you listen to them, and I learned to listen a lot more, take their advice, let them make mistakes. Definitely this new generation of people, work-life balance is huge. I made some mistakes along the way in that regard, thinking that, there's no badge of honor saying I've worked every 4th of July since 1977.
Isn't that the truth?
That's the dumbest statement in my life. That's nothing to be proud of, because all that did was take away time from my family.
Right.
So, if I could offer one word of advice to young people, that golf course is always going to be there. It's just turf.
Right.
Are you going to lose some? Sure. No,
you're not going to escape. You're not going to escape.
You're not going to escape it. You're going to lose some grass sooner or later. And at the end of the day, it's just grass.
Yeah.
Now what your job is to mitigate how much you lose and where you lose it at,
which you have little or no control over.
Well, you have little or no control, but I mean, you still have to take care of business, but you still have to take care of yourself and people. And, so this new generation of people, they want time off. They want instant gratification.
Yeah.
Because everything now is instant with that damn cell phone.
Right.
It's way different than,
So how do we strike that balance? I mean, you're right. It's just grass. It's just turf. You're going to lose some. It'll be there tomorrow, but there's also an awful lot of demand from our golfers. There's demand in weather that we don't have any control over. So I'm extremely hopeful, and I talk about this a lot. I'm extremely hopeful that the next gen of turf managers figure it out, because we didn't do it well, or
No,
we
we
didn't
haven't,
we
we
didn't
haven't
do
done
it.
it well at all.
So how do you strike that balance where, you know what, Johnny's got a game, I gotta be at the game, I'm gonna lock the door and I'll be here tomorrow, and it's 95 degrees with 100% humidity, and there's supposed to be a thunderstorm coming in.
Well,
How do they get there?
I think they got to surround themselves by great people.
Boy, that's so true.
That's
And
the
trust
biggest
them.
stuff. And trust them. You have to trust them.
Yep.
They're going to make mistakes, and you got to let them know it's okay.
Right.
I had an interesting conversation with my GM before I left, and he said, "Rick, I'm really not afraid to let somebody completely fail." And I'm like, "Really?" I said, "I've always been just the opposite. I never wanted them to fail, so I worked harder so they did." He says, "But you got to learn to let them fail, and then figure out how you're going to fix it, and let them learn from that mistake." And which
Trust that they've
totally
got
different attitude.
right. Well, especially for a GM,
Yeah,
because what rolls downhill and he's at the bottom of it.
exactly. But it was the interesting, unique perspective, and I thought about that a lot. And he's probably more right than I am.
Yeah. And the hard thing, I think, and I make generalizations that I probably shouldn't, but there's a lot of kids. You and I have, I'm sure, coached a lot. There's a lot of kids that haven't been allowed to fail.
Right.
So how do they take that, and how do they process that in a work environment when they haven't even been allowed to fail at home or on the playing field, or whatever it might be? The term helicopter parents, I've dealt with a ton of them as a coach, and I've heard now that there's parents showing up for reviews at jobs and things like that. Like
Well,
that,
it
can they
hit me
fail?
about 4 years ago when I had a young man working for me, great young man, and I said, "Hey, take this cart down there and fill it with gas to the gas pump." And he was very bewildered, gave me that look. I'm like, "What's the matter?" And he's like, "Rick, I don't know how to fill that. I don't know how to use a gas pump." I mean, here's an 18-year-old kid.
Wow.
And I thought I could tease the hell out of him, or I could help him change his life a little bit.
Right.
So I took him down, showing him how to use it. And I said, "Hey, who pumps your gas?" He said, "Oh, Dad takes my car out every day and puts gas in it." And I'm like, "Whoa."
My point.
Exactly your point. So we spent that whole summer teaching him stuff, and he turned out to be a great young man. I mean,
Yep.
he wrote me a really nice letter thanking me for spending the time to show him, to allow him to fail, and pick him up and let's move on.
I think it's in all of us, regardless of whether we had overbearing parents that filled our gas tanks for us, or a dad that was a Marine.
Right.
It's intrinsic in us. We just got to be allowed to let it come out. I would hate to see that young man as an assistant superintendent without that experience. So you did him a huge service in preparing him for that.
Yeah, I hope, I think what we taught him was that he can do it himself.
Sure. Of course.
That he had it in him to take on new things. And by the end of the summer, he was coming to us and saying, "Hey, did you see this, or did you see that?" And he knew he could give us feedback and
Right.
and listen to him. It was kind of fun.
Down the road, he might end up back in the industry. You never know.
Well, you never know.
Yeah. Yeah. What, speaking of getting into the industry, that's another thing that's really shifted in the last 5 or 10 years, maybe not even 10 years, but, the opportunities. I mean, you're a great example here. People have been waiting for Rick to die or retire for a long time. And now there's a lot of guys in my territory that are between my age and your age, mid 50s to mid 60s, that don't have a ton of years left. And the pipeline seems pretty empty right now.
I think there's a big void there. You know, I do see uh more kids in 2-year programs now.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot more kids in 2-year programs than in 4-year.
Are there some around you? Some 2-year programs?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, over at Kirkland College in Cedar Rapids has a
Yep.
great 2-year program. That's where my son went, Nate.
Okay.
And actually Mitch, who worked for me too, he had gone there. And actually JT Hauser, who replaced me at Des Moines Golf, was a Kirkwood grad, 2-year
Okay.
program. You know, so I mean, I think that's a big shift. You know, the 2-year Penn State program or the
Yep.
Rutgers program, I think are all going to be a huge pipeline for people to get it, you know, to get back in the industry. You know, it's just I think this industry, you still have to get dirty. You still have to, you're
Right.
working in the elements, you're working with Mother Nature, you know, and that's what I love about it. You know,
Right.
it's that I am doing those things, you know, but it's hopefully there's a huge influx of people back because of technology, make it a little easier,
Right.
you know.
Well, and relatable to
Yeah,
a younger
and
generation of
relatable. Right.
managers. I think that's the, you know, that's the hope, is that the technology, that the managers catch up with the technology, and I think that's going to be a pretty short gap that's going to be filling really quickly. Did you find yourself promoting from within a little more than you used to because of that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely. You know, we
Uh,
always tried to promote within, and I even had some people that I hired this past year or two because they had no turf experience whatsoever,
mhm.
but they had the right attitude,
Right.
and you can teach them.
I'm
You know,
seeing a huge trend in that direction.
yeah, you know, you can teach them how to run a moisture meter. That's
Yeah.
that's a perfect example.
Yep.
You know, and you know, you just got to learn to teach them how to see things different. You know, if they see something different, to communicate it to you.
Right.
You know, I always told my guys, you know, there's the only thing free here is communications. It doesn't cost you a damn thing to communicate.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, so do it. And you know, pretty soon you see them texting back and forth, which is, I guess, their new way.
It is what it is, right?
It is what it is. I learned to accept the cell phone. You know,
Yeah.
I hated it every day at break time or lunchtime. You come in and there's 10
Everybody's
people on their phones. There are 15, even the Hispanics, they're all on their phones and nobody's talking to each other.
Yeah.
Just drove me crazy.
Yeah, it's I still remember, I don't know how many years ago it was, but there were 2 high school kids on my team, and you know, morning meetings at 5 a.m. and these 2 guys were texting at 5 a.m. and I'm like, and I stopped the meeting and I said, who are you texting right now? And he pointed across the table at the guy across the table. I said, "Oh, so you don't agree with what I'm talking about, I guess." But yeah, it is what it is. That's how
Yeah.
we're communicating. I'm sure you're communicating with your grandkids and your kids that way. And
Yeah. Oh yeah.
you know, my mother-in-law, who's 82 years old, she's got her phone in her back pocket all the time, and that's just that's it's just the way that works. So, what other technologies? Um, and we talked about airification and some of the mowing equipment. What other technologies do you think are really shifting quickly?
Well, this deal, we just adopted the new Rainbird uh Pro system or whatever, their, you know, their control system.
Mhm.
It was the Cirrus Pro. It was unbelievable. You know what it could do, where you could be, you know, how you could see your weather stations on your phone and or your iPad, and you know, you just drive up to a head. And used to be we'd look at a dang map. You know, we had 3,500 sprinkler heads in Des Moines Golf.
Right.
You know, so you drive up to a head and you try to figure out which head it was on your map. Now Cirrus Pro, it's using GPS. You drive up, you know which head it is. You tap on it and it turns on, it turns off. You can pause it. You can do, you know, adjust it
Hmm.
so quickly. I mean, it just made life so much easier.
And again, to a younger turf manager or irrigation tech, that is probably very intuitive. you know,
Right,
it's just,
right.
it totally makes sense to them.
Yeah, for us who used to plug in big quick couplers and hoses and
The
in the
old
dark,
808s and all that
yeah,
stuff rattling around in the back of the Cushman.
you know, you're pulling a hose and it gets hung up on a tree, or night watering and all that stuff. And now it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's different. I don't know if
It's
it's any
different.
easier.
Yeah, I don't know if it's any easier. It's definitely different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think again, it's moving in the right direction.
Right. Right.
And I think if you can now relate that to zones of air, zones of different management zones as far as soil types, we ran the Toro had that machine, the precision turf management machine,
Yeah.
where you could figure out all these zones of compaction.
Mm-hmm.
You can then use different sensors in each one of those zones that tell you what the moisture was, and then you'd water back to, all like zones are the same. And, I mean, all that stuff is moving in the right direction. Again, it's just trying to get it all figured out. We had sensors on the backs of mowers that we could see, you can see a change from when I mowed the day before or 2 days before. You can see the delta, we called it, the change.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you can see drought coming on, or you could see disease coming on, or anything like that. It was really wild.
Was that the turf rat systems?
No, well, it was well before that. I worked
Okay.
with Toro even back when I was in Elmcrest in the late '90s. I worked with Toro on.
Okay.
We had all those. What the hell was it called? Lycor sensors or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was
Interesting.
it was very interesting. Well, where they were going with all that stuff, and it's just, again, it's now you see with the turf rad coming out, and now they're flying drones over doing the same thing.
Yeah. True.
So it's.
I wonder if there's a point of diminishing return on some of this, especially with water savings out in the West. I mean, that's what everybody's concerned with. And how much can we tweak the systems beyond what they are now? And maybe maybe there's plenty of opportunity still. I don't know.
I think they have to figure it out, because the number one resource we have in this world is water.
Yes.
And people have to learn how to start managing it the best way they can. I know for a fact that there were many years I overwatered. You overwatered because you were afraid to lose turf.
Right.
You didn't want to come back or whatever. And now, I know in my career at Des Moines Golf, the last 18 years here, we've definitely gotten much better at managing a very valuable resource.
Yeah, and I wonder how many times that you overwatered to avoid losing turf, that you lost turf because you overwatered.
Right? Exactly right. Yeah. You had it too wet.
Yeah, neither one of us want to admit that, but I mean that was a safety net, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I got to go home. I got to be with the family right now.
Right.
So.
You knew, like, if your kids had a ball game, or
Yeah.
you had them be somewhere, you're going to throw a little extra water on there just to.
It's like that old adage, paint it white and sleep at night, right? I mean, some of that stuff was prophylactic, but it was funny because I'm about 2 years into a 4-year term with the county soil and water conservation district. And when I introduced myself to the existing board members 2 years ago, that was immediately where they went, is, oh, you're the industry that wastes water and uses all these pesticides.
Yep.
And fortunately, with that small microcosm of people, a lot of whom were farmers, I've definitely changed their minds. But that's, we're in the crosshairs in this industry. There's no question about it.
We definitely are, and I think there's some very simple things that this industry could do right away. Just rain sensors. How many times have you?
Boy, 100%. But I will say that that's one of the things that, I didn't go into this assignment as a soil conservation member with an agenda. But if there were one thing, as good as our industry is, you think about commercial and residential and the waste that goes on there. If we could get, yes, we need to do this first. We need to lead by example, but man, what an opportunity to get sensing systems on, because everything's automated in the West.
And it's not that expensive.
It's not. It's
It's
not.
not very, I have a home irrigation system, and my controller, which I spend about $400 upgrading,
Mhm.
now gets its ET from a satellite.
Right. And it changes without you doing a thing.
Yeah, and my yard looks great, and
Yeah.
I tell it to, to water back 70% of ET or 60% of ET. And, my neighbor's like, what are you doing? You're over water. And I'm like, I am not. I'm just giving it the right amount of water.
Right. Yeah. It's education. It's interesting. So will you stay plugged in somehow? What are your plans?
So my plans, Kevin, I would love to, I want to give back to the industry.
Yeah.
And
How?
so if I want to make it known that if there's a golf course in Iowa that's having a problem and needs a little advice, I'm here to help.
So is that officially, or is that just as an industry friend?
Yeah, officially, I'm, I don't know how that's going to be done yet, but I want to get the word out. Again, I don't want to be a paid consultant.
Sure.
But cover my gas to get me there, and I'll spend I want to, people did that for me. Way back in the 70s, people did that for me.
100%.
So I want to be able to do, we don't do that enough for each other.
Right.
Again, as I see this industry, like last Friday. Yeah, I went fishing with Chris Cohen from Glen Oaks because we're great friends. And we talked about that. You're not going out and playing golf with your buddies like you used to do way back in the 80s, or or call them and just talking. It's just now, if you don't text them or see them on Twitter or whatever, you really don't communicate with them.
You might catch them at an association meeting twice a year or something, and that's about it.
If they show up for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And it's funny because, we're both in seasonal climates, and you tend to get your head down and really kind of dig in. And some of that communication and the social aspect, I think, has fallen victim to the work-life balance, right?
Right.
A lot of people are prioritizing family over going out and drinking a few beers and playing golf with your buddies. I smile every time I see this, but the entire Spokane Coeur d'Alene superintendent role has shifted to the next gen. Almost every one of them, with the exception of maybe 2, are under 40, which I think is great. Every superintendent is young but they don't talk a whole lot. So I started a group text a couple of years ago just to see if anybody would participate. And I'll usually splash something out every couple weeks or something if it's been quiet. And then all of a sudden they start talking with each other and, hey, what are you doing with this? And it just makes me smile that, that they're actually communicating with each other. And then one of my reps out in California, I don't know if you know Don Nauman, but he's got he started years ago with a group of superintendents that you would know, the Pat Finlands of the world and that group. But they started their Friday safety meetings, and it was every couple weeks, I think. Wasn't a whole lot of safety talk about, but at least that got them out of the office and talking. And so we've kind of started that here, and that's good stuff.
I think that's great.
Yeah, not everybody can make it, and that's fine, but it's just a good chance to kind of get together and let off some steam and talk shop.
We have I'm going this Thursday. We have a retired superintendent's group that gets together.
Awesome.
I was added a couple of years ago before I retired, but now this will be my first official luncheon.
Now you're official member, right? You were honorary before that. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about, unless you've got other stuff that you want to get off your chest, is and I checked with you before we got on, but one of the realities of where you are now, and I'm 57, so I'm kind of it's starting to creep in the back of my mind about retirement. talk to me about kind of what the last 5 to 10 years entailed with planning for this day, number one, and what maybe you would suggest people do differently.
Well, number one, and my dad beat this into my head a long time ago. He said, pay yourself first.
Right.
So
Right.
when I first took my first job in 1980, I started an IRA.
Awesome.
And that has enabled, Sherry and I, with that mentality to be at the point where we are today.
Yeah.
So that itself has helped a lot.
Even when you can't afford it, you have to pay yourself first.
You have to somehow, even I don't even, even if it's 1%,
Right. Right.
do something. I see there's guys out there that I know that say, I got to work till I'm 70 because I can't afford to retire.
Right.
What a shame that is, because
to have to do it.
I mean,
to have to.
Right. They have to. You work your whole life to get to this point, and you want to be able to enjoy it and get out there and do things, with your wife or with your grandkids, your kids, or whoever, your friends. So pay yourself first. Couple things I learned: make sure you separate life and work, your home life and your work life, meaning emails. It took me 3 months to get emails changed on all these accounts.
Yeah.
I never thought I was that stupid, but I was.
Well, the creep is pretty easy when you start to interweave everything and
right. You're sitting at your computer at work and you go to this website and you put in your work email address, and it's really a personal thing, and don't do that.
Yeah.
Get it changed now.
That's a good one. I didn't even think about that. That's a really good one.
It's haunted me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's hard to get all that changed over.
Yep.
This computer I have here at home, I just got the Microsoft account changed. It took 30 days to get it changed.
No kidding.
Yeah. But, so that's a great piece of advice.
Well, and that doesn't necessarily have to be in preparation for retirement either. I mean, there should be a firewall between the two lives, right?
Right. That's something you should be doing now.
Well, I noticed that when I left, when I got fired from Coeur d'Alene, I mean, that was something that I never thought about. There's so much overlap, and keeping my same phone number was another thing that taught me, gosh, I don't need the sand company calling me 3 years after I left the golf course to let me know they're going to be delivering between 8 and noon. Like, he needs to have a different phone number, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The last thing you need to really look at all these. I had a nice 401k plan. I had a 457 plan, which a lot of people didn't know what that is.
I don't know what that is.
So 457, so on a 401k plan, like our club, we had, I don't know how many people were in the 401k plan, but it gets top heavy. If you're one of the top 3 or 4 wage earners in the company, you can't put in too much. You can't put in all the money you'd like to put in.
So the 457 must be like an executive deferment plan or something.
Exactly
like
right.
Yeah.
And I took advantage of it.
Yeah.
And it's the best thing I ever did.
Yeah. It wasn't so much for me. I had the same thing, but what I wasn't aware of is you either had to retire like you did or die. Otherwise you had to start taking disbursements. So that all went away, and I got taxed, and that, unfortunately, it didn't work out the way maybe I had thought it would, but for you, it's perfect.
When I was at Elmcrest, I had an annuity plan on top of my retirement plan. And the annuity was going to be that if I stayed until age 55, I could start taking that annuity for 10 years and I can retire early. Okay. So I became fully invested in it, and I owned it, they owned it, but I was fully vested. So when I left there, unfortunately, they just paid me out that plan, and I lost probably half of it in AMT.
40-50%. Yeah.
Taxes.
Yeah.
So just have a good just have a good financial advisor to
Yeah.
help you get through all this stuff, that to help you plan, and the last thing that I've done, Sherry and I've done is we've diversified. We got into an investment group that, we own storage garages in 7 states now.
Okay.
And, we took a little bit of our money, a little bit of a calculated risk, but it's been well worth it now.
How long ago did you start that?
We did it 4 years ago.
Okay.
A friend of mine, all these years I've worked for country clubs, private clubs, and you see people taking a risk and doing things. And I always thought, man, I wish, why didn't I do that? Or,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Well, opportunity came knocking and I said, no. And Sherry said, grow some balls.
And it's completely the opposite in our family.
Well,
Like, I would be the one saying, come on, honey, we got to do this.
I always was too, but as I got closer, I didn't want to do it. But we did it. We invested, and it's been a very nice little
Good
nest
passive
egg.
income. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you learn business, because you've got all this depreciation of all these buildings you're building and land and everything, and yeah, you've got passive income that will now start coming in, but you've got all that stuff to go against that income, and it's not, we actually started an LLC with our kids to pass some of that money on to them, so.
That's great. That's really good advice. Going back to the concept of the 401k, I mean, it's just, it's tragic. And I know everybody's in different positions and different points in their lives, but I would beg employees, maybe not assistants or superintendents, but employees, you've got an individual who's willing to give you to match whatever you'll save up to a percentage, and you're not going to take advantage of this. Like, this guy won't part with $1, but he's willing to do it in this case. You have to take advantage of it. And it's amazing how few do, and where that leaves them at the end.
I have a superintendent friend of mine that has, I asked him, I said, are you putting money in a 401k? And he said, no, the club does, they have a 401k plan, but they don't match. So I don't put any into it. I'm just investing on my own. And I'm thinking, you're taking money that's already been post-tax now,
right,
and investing it instead of taking advantage of the pre-tax.
Leaving money on the table.
And medical plans, if you're not doing, cafeteria plans and stuff, learn all that stuff and take advantage of those things.
That's something I'm sure you had to figure out pretty quickly, right?
Well, luckily for me, Sherry knew all that. That was her business. She was in the HR field a little bit, and so we took advantage of every opportunity we could to use the loopholes that were created for us to use.
Yeah. Well, those are good pieces of advice. I hope, if there's any takeaway, I hope that people start thinking about that, whether they're 25 or 65, you got to start.
You got to start. And, even if you're putting away $500 a year,
right, it's
something.
Yeah. My middle son, got on with Costco, which is a great company to be an employee at, right out of high school. And so he's been with them for 7 years now, but, they have an opt-out program in their retirement plan. And I think they match 5 or 6%. I mean, it's a pretty high percentage. And I told him, if you sign that opt-out paper or you're thinking about it, I will break your hand. because at 18 years old, you start chipping in, 5% of your income. My gosh, at 55, he's a millionaire.
Yeah.
And if you never see it, you don't miss it. And so, I think he's starting to realize the value of that. And the other thing he realizes is the value, like you said, of health insurance. And, his wife is going through she broke her foot and she went back into surgery for a second time to repair something that wasn't healing right. And, those are real life things. And I think as you get a little bit older, that insurance nut is a pretty big one when all of a sudden now you're on your own, right?
It is. It
Yeah.
is. Right.
That from the people that are in your position, it seems like that's the biggest regular expense that has to be reckoned with. So, like you said at the beginning, getting yourself healthy and getting out and walking every day is a huge step in the right direction. So
Those two artificial knees, you got to get them going in the right direction. So
I was up on the mountain this morning between raindrops trying to get mine back in shape. So you're right. Well, listen, I'm not going to keep you any longer. You probably got other stuff to do, but congratulations on a great career. You've made a huge impact in the industry, and you may be gone, but you won't be forgotten, and stay plugged in. And I think it's exciting. Hopefully we'll bump into each other somewhere along the way. And
I definitely want to stay involved,
yeah, and you should.
Yeah, I will, so I won't make it to GIS this year in San Diego, but next year when it's in Florida, I'm going to be there. So
you'll be there. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually I get my 40 years CGCS next year.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
How long have you been a master greenkeeper?
I got that in must have been 2016, I think.
Okay. Will you maintain both of those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
Well, I guess as a retired.
Yes. I'm a life member now of both associations.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel old.
It was, well, that's okay.
Yeah, I want to stay involved in both.
You are old.
I am old. I'm 65 now, I mean, but it's good to stay involved. You got to have a reason to get up in the morning.
That's 100%. I mean, you've seen that. I've seen that with members. A health setback for even for the guy that played 9 holes 3 times a week. He suffers a health setback. He's gone in 6 months.
Right. You have to have one reason to get up every day.
Yep.
Whether it's to get up and just walk or exercise or, my list is long every day. I didn't think I could fill it every day, but I sure so far been able to do that. So
I still remember, it was September, so it was a little bit earlier than this, after I left the golf course, and I think I told this story somewhere. It might have been for golf course industry or something, but I'm standing, we're grass farmers. So you look at, you want to watch every rainfall, especially in the West when it doesn't happen very often. And I'm standing in the garage door's open. I'm standing in my garage watching this. It's the first rain we'd had in several months. And I looked up and water's just pouring over the gutters. And I said, oh, gutters are clogged. I wonder how long that's been like that. So I'm sure you've got a honey-do list that's 100 miles long right now, but
yeah,
slow but sure, you'll chip away at it. So, well, when you make your trek out west, be sure to look me up. We've got a spot for you and would love to have you. So
I'd love to see you. So
we'll keep in touch, Rick, and thank you again for all your years of service and all you've done for the industry. And wish you the best of luck. Thanks for having me on,
and thanks to Earthworks. I appreciate them and everything Joel's done for me and you.
You bet. He'll be happy to listen to this, and I'm sure he'll be happy to say hi in Orlando in a couple of years.
Yep. So very good.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for the time, and take good care of yourself.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.